I think I am live now. I'm just gonna check that we are working all okay. So let me just see. Okay, all right. I think I'm live now. If you guys can see me and hear me in the chat, if you could let me know, that would be great. My screen is still waking up, so just testing that everything is working so we can get started. And yeah, it's a little bit windy here in Bilbao today, but nothing new in that regards. So let's see. Right, I think all is good here. Brilliant. And I have like a minute, less than a minute to get started. Oh hey, hi everybody, thank you for letting me know. Hi Anne, hi Cindy, thank you so much for being here. Hope you're doing good. Hi Chris, thank you for joining me, guys. Hope you're having a really lovely time, and I'm glad everything is working fine. Like I said, well, you may see it, it's quite windy. I do have a new windproof microphone, so which should be okay, but you know, I always like being extra careful. So there you go. And we are gonna start in exactly well, like now, 2 seconds. So so here we go. Excellent. Well, hi everybody. I'm gonna get rolling since we have a little bit of legwork to do and things to see here in Bilbao, and I have another tour straight after this. So let's make sure that we stay on point. Well, before we get started, a very big welcome to the Basque Country here, to Euskadi. My name is Dr. Lilian Céspedes González, Lily for everyone that knows me, and it's doctor because I have a PhD in history from the University of Winchester, and I'm a tour guide. And today we're in the lovely town of Bilbao, which is a town that is becoming a lot more popular nowadays because of tourism, but that, well, it hasn't always been that popular in that regards. So I'm gonna be showing you around the new area of Bilbao. It's the area around the Nervion river. We are literally right next to it, so as soon as I turn on the camera the other side, you will see it. And we will be walking towards the area of the Guggenheim. So the big sort of attraction of today is that huge museum with its very iconic architecture, which I'm sure you're all gonna enjoy. And without any further ado, let me just turn the camera around. There we go. Excellent. Right, so we are right here next to another well-renowned area of Bilbao, which is the area by the bridge Zubizuri. So this bridge, and I'm actually going to get us up the stairs or the ramp just so we can see the views from the top of it, is actually very famous because it was designed by a very famous architect as well, Calatrava. Some of you may know him because he's also the designer of the area in Valencia for La Ciudad de las Artes y las Ciencias, the science city. And he's very well known for having these sort of iconic structures that look a bit sort of futuristic, or well, critics say it looks futuristic. It's entirely up to you to decide. I'm not entirely sure I agree with it, but you know, it's one of these things. And the place where the bridge is located sort of separates the old town of Bilbao over to the new area, which is sort of where we're facing right now. You can see one of the edges of Guggenheim in here. And here we have the lovely river Nervion, of which I'll explain more in a few moments, and the view towards the old town right ahead of us. As you can see, Bilbao is a city of stark contrasts. We have quite a lot of modern and contemporary architecture in here on the right, while as soon as I get over to the other side of the bridge, you're gonna see more traditional buildings and more traditional architecture, as we're gonna be doing in general throughout the tour. And that's kind of the reason why Bilbao has become now, you know, a hip up-and-coming city. Well, this is the best view we're gonna get of the bridge by Calatrava. And what I haven't told you is the fact that this bridge actually became very, very controversial. Now, as you can see, it's quite spindly. It doesn't have quite a lot of support. And, well, you cannot quite tell today because we have a more or less reasonable day in terms of weather. But we're in the north of Spain, and it's rainy over here most of the time. You're gonna see as soon as we start moving down the river, a few hills and a few sort of forested areas which are testimony of the beautiful landscapes of the Basque Country. Issues that architects and designers need to take into consideration. Well, this bridge, similarly to the one in London, to the Millennium Bridge, was not designed for the rain, and people kept slipping on it. Now in Bilbao we do have also an aging population, and this caused quite a fair few problems, so it became a very controversial bridge, and one that the locals did not like at all. But well, as a structure it's been amended, as you can see. In fact, they have now put this special tarmac to avoid those problems and make it, a bit more durable for the future. So as I turn the gimbal over to the other side of the Nervion River, I'm sure you can see exactly what I mean. We have the very tall new buildings here on the right, and at the back end, that is the old town of Bilbao. Now, there are two main reasons why we're not going to be seeing the old town of Bilbao today. The first one is that today is Domingo de Ramos. For those of you who may not be familiar with Easter traditions in Spain, Domingo de Ramos is very important. It's the first Sunday of Easter, where all of our processions start. And the parade that was happening today, and that I will be posting a video for a little later on this evening, was taking place and collapsing the majority of the city center. So we couldn't circulate through it happily, which is the reason why we've stayed here in the new section. The other reason why we're starting the tour over here is because actually, as you're gonna find out, the history of Bilbao is really not that relevant until modern times. So it made little sense to take you over there to see some buildings that frankly are most of them not that historical, because there's been extensive renovations. So that's why we're starting here. So now that you've gotten the views of the river, now that you have a better understanding of how this city is disposed, and we've discussed the mishap here with Calatravas Bridge, and we're gonna just go down and actually follow the line of our tour. I'll give you one final view of the actual shape of the bridge itself, and we'll get started down this way. And if at some point you see a very cute border collie sort of coming to find me, do not be alarmed. It's actually my parents' dog, and he's a little bit stressed today, so he likes finding his humans. Anyway, this is the lovely River Nervion, and actually, although very much has lost its importance in terms of the contribution that it's done to the city in this day and age, without the River Nervion, we wouldn't be having this conversation at all. A few days ago, some of you may have seen a few publications I made on social media for World Water Day, and how I explained that it's really not just rivers, but any kind of body of water that makes community, that makes civilization in that regards. Well, here in Bilbao is very much the case, because thanks to the River Nervion and the fact that Bilbao is exactly 16 kilometers south from the Bay of Biscay, from the Gulf of Biscay, it's a really strategic location for the flourishing of communities. Well, the River Nervion is a not terribly long river. As you can see, it's quite wide, but not terribly long. It actually is born in the area of Burgos, in the north of Castile, where I'm sure many of you have done a few tours with me, and from the area of Álava, which is actually very close to that Castilian border once again. And as a result, that river has always been super important for the development of not just Bilbao, but the whole of the Basque Country. The Basque Country, by the way, is the name of the region where we are in Spain right now. In Spanish, we call it El País Vasco, but I also want to give you the name of this area in Basque, in Euskera. And I will explain why this matters in a few moments. But in the meantime, I would just like you to know that you should call the area of the Basque Country Euskadi, or Euskal Herria. That is the actual name and how the locals refer to it. So for the sake of, being aware of our cultural differences and whatnot, that's the appropriate name for this area. Well, that border between what is Euskadi and Castile has always been super important because of that cultural identity. You see, Euskadi, the Basque Country, País Vasco, has always had its own identity. And what do I mean by that? Well, let me give you some facts. Bilbao, which is the largest city in the Basque Country, yet not the capital, by the way. The capital and the administrative center of the Basque Country is actually in Vitoria, which is another lovely town that I hope to take you sometime, is in a way the center of Basque nationalism, which stems from the very fact that the Basque people are they have their own genetic pool. It's not like the same than the rest of Spain. They have their own tongue, which is Euskera, what we call Basque language in that regards. And in fact, Euskera is one of the oldest languages that we have in Europe. And it's very mysterious, guys. We have got no idea kind of where it came from, what relationship it holds to other languages. Is very mysterious. So we know that in order for communities to have strong identities, they need a general cultural background, often emphasized by a shared language. In the case of the people of the Basque Country, it's a language that no one else in Spain shares, almost no one else in Europe, although we have found some correlation between Euskera and some. But it's a very, localized thing. This, by the way, it's a monument that highlights something that you cannot see here anymore. This statue has been here since 2020. It was done by Dora Salazar, and it is called Las Sirgueras, which, as you can see, is just these women that are pulling the ropes of the ships. Well, this whole area that we're walking by here in the river Nervion is the area of the old docks of the river that were the life of the city. Like I said, that has changed over time, but its industrial heritage is still very well remembered. Well, as I was saying, with this cultural identity of the Basque Country, it's very important that we acknowledge that Basque people have their own ways of doing things and their own language. Like I mentioned earlier, it's even something that we can find in their DNA. I'm not entirely sure what the correct terminology is for it in English, so please forgive me for it. But in DNA genetics, we actually have something that is called in Spanish RH, which is, I suspect in English will be similar, RH. And the RH or RH can be positive or negative. 90% of the population of the Basque Country has it as negative, which is not something the majority of the population in Spain shares. So as you can see, they are united by many different things. And that, I guess, difference is what has made them very, very prone to their independentist nature, which is something that often comes up in the news. I am very aware that when Spain comes up in the news, it's often, at least from the point of view of other countries in Europe or, America or somewhere else, it's always from the point of view of our political landscape. And that is because, well, our political landscape is a little bit messy, and that political landscape is very well reflected. See here on the left, we have the Guggenheim Museum just shaping. Oh, it is called RH factor. Excellent, thank you, Anne. I was not sure, so I'm glad that it was more or less similar. Well, as you can see also on the other side of the river Nervion, you can see all of these green areas, these mountains that I was mentioning before, and that highlight the kind of climate that we have in this part of Spain. We're right in the north. It gets cold in here. I don't know if you saw me at the beginning of the live stream. I have a coat on, even though it's more or less sunny. It's quite windy. We're at 15 degrees. Humidity level today here is 80%. So, well, it's raining and not the most pleasant of weathers. Nonetheless, it's part of the character and part of the culture, again, of Bilbao, of Vizcaya, which is the region, the province, and then the Basque Country, Euskadi, which is the region itself. Well, why am I saying all of this? Hey Lama, how are you doing? Welcome, Natalie. Lovely having you here. Why am I saying all this? Well, because the very area where the Guggenheim is actually built, and since we are approaching the museum, I want to give you a little bit more of background around the area. All of this was all part of the industrialization of the town, which is really what brings prosperity to the area. You see, the town of Bilbao has some uncertain origins, okay? We're not entirely sure as to when it really blooms, when it becomes a proper town. We have some evidence that we have found in the old part of town for a fortress that actually dates all the way to the 11th century, but we are not entirely sure if that was part of the town itself or just the church and the ecclesiastical community over there. Notice, by the way, the huge piece of street art that is on the other side of the road. And here you're going to find some buildings that are more typical Bilbao architecture, mostly from the 19th century and early 20th century. Hi, Helen. Thank you so much for being here. Lovely having you in there. Well, this whole area, which we call it El Muelle de la Campa de los Ingleses, the docks of the Englishmen fields, in many ways, becomes mostly popular from the 16th century onwards. We do know that the town of Bilbao as a town was properly founded in the 14th century by a man called Diego López Quinto de Haro. Diego López V of Haro. The lords of Haro have always been a very important noble family, not just here in Bilbao, but in the general area of the region that we're in, and they became the main lords of the city. Well, as a result, this town mostly became a port that served the area of the Crown of Castile. And as you know, the Crown of Castile, just like with Santander, used all of the ports in the north side of the Iberian Peninsula to trade their main export, which was wool, that beautiful merino wool that we get from the areas around Segovia, etc., etc. That is what we normally exported from here. But Bilbao had also another resource, which is what's going to make this river area very important, which is iron. The metallurgic industry, not just around Bilbao, but in the Basque Country, has always been a very important economic and prosperous development for its inhabitants. And all those goods came up and down through this river that we've been walking around, and that has developed this general area. This degree of industrialization is going to be even more enhanced during the 19th century. You know, the developments that we create in industry are going to be massive, and this will proliferate even further in the 20th century in one of the darkest moments in the Spanish history, which is the Franquist regime. During Franco's regime, there was actually a huge support for metallurgy because it was part of their economic totalitarian development to make Spain a sort of strong, nation. So of course the area of Bilbao, although it was quite damaged during the Civil War, and the reason why the old town doesn't kind of maintain a lot of its original architecture, it will have that prosperity. So the area that you have here in the Guggenheim with our first pet, the mama, which is the spindly spider here, all of this was part essentially of the old dock, which used to serve for the transport of those ironworks and wood. There was a wood warehouse here as well. All of that gets essentially decommissioned, and in the 90s the city of Bilbao is in desperate change for new adventures, new capital gains. So all of this area is deindustrialized and essentially transformed into modern urban environments, and that's the reason why the incredible building you have right in front of you is so important. And yes, Cindy, very wide bridge. In fact, the name of the river in Euskera actually means wide river. So we don't really know where Nervion specifically comes from, but we know that the previous word for it in Euskera actually meant wide river. So what we're going to do now is we're going to essentially go around the Guggenheim so you can see the different views. So we're going to go underneath Mama first, which is the spindly spider. It freaks me out, so I'm going to point the gimbal up so you guys can see it, but I'm mostly going to be walking forward. Plus I can see there is quite a lot of sun in here, so there is going to be a lot of reflections. And actually, in some ways, that's exactly what I was hoping for, because with the sun reflection we can understand why Frank Gehry, the architect of the Guggenheim, decided the building to be the way it is. Now, you may be blinded by this amazing cover of titanium. A lot of people don't know this, but the Guggenheim is mostly built with glass, stone, and this titanium skin. And in fact, now that I get a little bit of shade, you should be able to see that a bit better. Now, you may be wondering why titanium skin. Well, imagine, with the weather that we have here in the north of Spain, the wind and the rain, if this was bronze, it would be completely ruined and, green by now. Since metallurgy has always been a very strong, industry here in the Basque Country, we do have some of the best engineers in Spain in that regards. So this was created for such purpose. The titanium is very durable, and it also allows us to create these effects of light. As you can see, we have a little canalization of the river here, which allows to reflect the light onto the wall. And of course, as the day goes by, you see this wall change colors. Sometimes it's light blue, sometimes it's more like a, platinum white. Then it changes to something grayer. It can change to pure gold in the summer. So whenever you come to Bilbao and you see the Guggenheim, it doesn't matter if you've seen it 1,000 times before. It always changes, and it's always here to surprise you. Well, this structure was designed, like I said, in the 90s as part of this reurbanization of the city center of Bilbao. As the industry Euskadi has one of the wealthiest economies in the whole of Spain. They have very good education as well, and as a result, well, they didn't need to, let's say, carry on utilizing traditional industries. They could, develop things a little further. So this area was really put forward as a way of, well, making the town of Bilbao a bit more presentable and a bit more interesting, because, well, traditionally speaking, it came across as an industrial town that nobody really wanted to see or come to. Consider that we're only an hour away from San Sebastian, which is also in the Basque Country, and that has a very wonderful reputation for being a beautiful maritime city, and there was, stark competition. Well, the other reason why this area needed to be redeveloped is because currently Bilbao, although not the capital, is the largest city in the Basque Country. The town of Bilbao itself, the city, actually has a total population of about 350,000 inhabitants, but the whole metropolitan area is over 1 million people. Okay, in the whole of Euskadi, we have over 2 million inhabitants. Consider that half of them live in the surrounding area that you're seeing right here. So of course, it was very important to provide, a different type of lifestyle, entertainment, etc., for those people. On the other side, you can see some of the traditional architecture from the early 20th century, the building right in front of us between the more obvious blocks of flats. That is actually a residence for the elderly. It's actually run by the Jesuits, if I remember correctly. And in fact, the Jesuits have a lot of power in this town still. You have seen a few buildings here and there. In fact, as I keep on moving the gimbal farther away, the next block of flats onwards, all of that is part of the University of Deusto, and then we have also the Public University of Bilbao. The Public University of Bilbao, as the name suggests, is a public university. Anybody has access to it, but the University of Deusto is a private university funded by the Jesuits, and one of the best schools in Bilbao as well is also a Jesuit school. So as you can see, there is still a lot of ties to the old ways in which Spain used to be organized and run. Oh, Tina, no worries. Well, this is gonna remain on YouTube, so you can always catch up from the beginning, don't you worry. Well, I'm just giving you the Guggenheim now from different perspectives. As the Guggenheim gets developed in the late 90s, in fact it gets finished in 1997, this was a huge project developed by Frank Gehry. And what is remarkable is that this huge construction that you see here, and we still have not seen it all, was actually finished in time and on budget. And a budget that was quite remarkable, guys. I'm talking of over $100,000 million. It's like bonkers, and yet all well. That's the reason why the Guggenheim represents many things for Bilbao. And in fact, we say that after the Guggenheim was finished, there is the whole Guggenheim effect, or the whole Bilbao effect, which will affect the rest of the community and the rest of the development of the city. And that's the reason why this part, the new part of Bilbao, is very, very different in comparison to the old one in that regards. Well, let me show you a couple more bits here around the Guggenheim. I think we have about 5 to 10 minutes on this tour. So let me tell you more about the building itself and about its architect and designer, Frank Gehry. And these ones, the balls are always here. Some of the other installations kind of come and go, because the Guggenheim is actually designed as a large-scale, site-based kind of installations. What do I mean by that? Nothing small is ever exposed in the Guggenheim inside. It's always big pieces. They are actually often commissioned or designed for the purpose of being exhibited in those huge rooms. So, everything keeps its own context. And what I mean with site base is that, the specifications of a lot of those constructions follow literally the design of the building itself. Oh, llama, this may be off topic, but I'm curious, are there any fish in the water? Not on this one. You may be able to see a penny or two, but there are no fish on this side of the canalization of the river, precisely to ensure that everything is fine. And on the river Nervion itself, there are fish. You just cannot see them very often because, although the river itself has been very much clean and, prepared for modern living and for sustainability, we actually have a serious problem in this area with overfishing because of, like I said, there's a lot of people in here. And in any case, the majority of the fish in the Basque Country, the tradition, comes from the sea. So the river doesn't have as many fishes as one would expect in that regards. Well, here I'm sure you've noticed, since we've been looking at the Guggenheim for such a long time, that the shapes of this building are quite curious, right? There's a lot of curves and curves that follow, different sort of sides and shapes and everything. Well, that is entirely done on purpose. That's because Frank Gehry wanted to use the light that you see here, not just coming from the sky, but from the river itself, to actually be master of the story that he's telling you. And by producing these different shapes of curves, he's essentially leveraging that at best in titanium. No worries, Lama, my pleasure. Well, we're now gonna start walking towards the other very important pet of the Guggenheim Museum, which I'm sure many of you have heard about and probably are looking forward to it. So if you've only just joined the tour, don't worry, we've not missed one of the highlights. I'm just gonna turn around. I just need to give some space to these tourists. And in the meantime, I'll tell you a little bit more about what you're seeing here. So as you can see, the Nervion River carries on and on and on and on and on for quite some time. And it's a huge walk. As you see, it's all flat, it's perfectly accessible, and that's part of this new urbanization of Bilbao, which is, the reason why this is, as you can see, also a very prolific area. But it also meant that new industries came here. That huge building that we have in front of us, that is the Iberdrola Tower, and it is where one of the most important electric companies of Spain is located nowadays. This area is one of the most touristic parts of the city. It brings way over 4 million people over here every single year. So I'm sure you can imagine how important it is for business to have the Guggenheim just here. But that doesn't mean that the Guggenheim Museum has always just been sunshine and rainbows and all happy. Here you can see the more classical design on some of the sites with purely just white stone. Because, as I'm sure you can imagine, a city that has traditionally just lived off its port and its imports of wool and iron probably wasn't a very wealthy community. And if you were thinking that, you would be 100% on point, because that is the case. The area of Bilbao, and in general, the las villas marineras, as we call them, the maritime cities of the north of Spain, tend to be, only wealthy because of their, I was just hoping that the fountains go on, and they just did. This is part of the installation here in the Guggenheim. They take different turns into how the fountains go up and down. So this area was really quite, let's just say, quite poor, working class, as I'm sure you can imagine. With the deindustrialization of the area and the re-urbanization, a lot of people claim that what has happened to Bilbao, particularly this area, which is traditional, dock work, working class, etc., has become gentrified. God forbid. So, I say it like that because I think it's a funny thing to complain about. But you must understand that for the locals, once again, that's part of their identity. Now, although the Basque Country is now an incredibly wealthy area, one of the wealthiest in Spain, again, their roots are very important for Basque people. So erasing part of, the industrial heritage of the city in some ways was sort of like not being truthful to themselves, if you see what I mean. The other issue that has been with the Guggenheim, and that is often, I guess, criticized for, I'll try to give you a view of the water fountains from here. It's the fact that apparently the construction of the Guggenheim Museum is some form of cultural imperialism. And you're probably wondering, how on earth could that be? Well, let me just carry on going up the stairs because we have a few more until we get to Puppy, and I'll explain. Now, the Guggenheim Museum is one of the many museums that the Solomon Guggenheim Foundation has all around the world. And originally, a lot of the pieces that came here were borrowed from New York and a few from Venice, meaning that there was no Basque art, no Basque culture, or even Spanish on display, which for them was a serious problem because, like I have explained, it is part of their identity, is part of the reason why they, have this very strong background that is established in the roots. So it's caused quite a lot of, controversies over the years. It's easy enough because it brings a lot of wealth and a lot of good things to the city, but it's definitely not always made a lot of friends. Hey, Emma, how are you doing? Thank you so much for joining us. And this is, well, the classic entrance to the Guggenheim that I suspect most people expect to see at some point. You can really see here today the light and shadow game that the titanium does with that glass and with the stonework is really truly beautiful and remarkable. Well, we have just a few more minutes on the tour, so I'm gonna take you to the other very important attraction that we have here at the entrance of the Guggenheim. Let me just back away so we can go and see the puppy, which is of course one of the most beloved sites in all of Bilbao. But before we do that, let me give you that last view of the countryside that you have literally on the edge of the town, just so you can once again the Basque Country for Euskadi. Euskadi is green, Euskadi is mountains, is the river, is its people that have been working a hard life for a really long time. Lucky to be wealthy and, very ahead of their time in this day and age, but important to remember those roots again. And here is the puppy. So we're gonna see the puppy from the front, and in the meantime, let me give you a few details about it. As you can see, there's a lot of people here trying to take a picture. I'll try to frame us in the best way possible. Well, the puppy has been here since 1992, if I remember correctly, and it is the construction of Jeff Koons. Jeff Koons did actually something quite remarkable here with this, well, I was going to call it statue. It's not really a statue. It's not exactly just an art installation, because Jeff Koons is a very smart man, you see. Jeff Koons is often what we call the connection between popular culture and elite culture. And I think you can see that in part of the design of it. I'll get you a little bit closer in a few moments so you can see the flowers. But everything that you see here was actually designed with a computer program to recreate the essence of a formal 18th century English garden. Those of you from the UK or in love with gardening may already start seeing the references in there. Otherwise, like I said, I'll get you a bit closer in a moment and you can see it for yourself. Why did he decide to do it this way? Why give it the shape of the puppy? I'm sure you can see the face in there with the nozzle and the little ears. Well, because Jeff Koons, once again, wanted to leverage a lot of the new industries that were happening around the world in the 90s. At that moment in time, the world of media and advertisement was starting to be really strong, and he felt it was better suited to transmit the message that he wanted to pass on, which with the flowers and the puppy, perhaps you already guessed, because who doesn't like flowers and who doesn't like puppies? The entire idea behind the puppy is essentially ultimate optimism. Everything is going to be okay. Everything is awesome. And I think you can tell, particularly since we're now in spring and the flowers are really coming to bloom, this is quite a joyful sight. And that makes quite a strong contrast with the, titanium and stone that we have behind it. So that's the reason why the puppy has become such an important icon of what Bilbao also is. Because actually this town now has really embraced that fun-loving kind of vibe. Bilbao is a very important town for the development of the music industry, and we also have a very important football club in here, which brings a lot of joy to the locals, El Atleti de Bilbao. And it's again part of the joy that this community has been able to develop from the very, very basic lives that they used to have all the way back in the 14th to 16th century. And that is pretty much all we have time for today. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take you to one of the side bits so you can see the full size of the Guggenheim Museum, just for scale, and that's where we will wrap it up. Oh, I named him Bob the Puppy. I think it's an excellent name for the pup himself. Well, let me just take you here so we can see the puppy from the back. Well, actually, let me take you a little bit closer now that there has been an opening here at the back so you can see the flowers, and then we'll go through the back so you can see the Guggenheim itself, and then that would be all we'll have time for. But as you can see, these are real flowers. This is not fake. Those are forget-me-nots. Remember that I'm not very good with flowers, so I may not know what they all are, but as you can see, this is just a beautiful vertical garden here, displaying all the beauty of spring and all the joy in the world. Excellent. Well, with that little bit of puppy, once again, we will take to the back and we will wrap this up. And actually, I don't know if you can see because the lights on the store are turned off, but on right that corner is the official store of the Athletic Club de Bilbao, which, like I was saying, is very important for the town because it's one of the very few, in fact, if not the only one, football club in Spain that, well, started very at the beginning because the Athletic Club was actually developed in the 19th century by English sailors and merchants that were coming, of course. In fact, the colors of Athletic Club are very much informed by Sunderland FC and the Southampton Saints. So, you know, ties with back home everywhere. And, well, it's very important because it always showcases Basque players. So, once again, going back to those roots. So here we have the Iberdrola Tower, another building from the University of Deusto. No worries, Emma, this is going to remain on YouTube, so you can go on and watch it back in full. And here we have the full size of the Guggenheim Museum, just so you can understand now that I'm at quite a distance how massive this building is. I didn't actually give you the full area that it covers, but the Guggenheim, not just the monument itself, but the area that includes, you know, the puppy mama and the balls and whatnot, is about 32,500 square meters. So that's the sheer scale of it all. And that is where I'm gonna turn the camera to. Goodbye. So I hope that you have enjoyed Bilbao, whether you're watching us here live or later, and I hope that if you ever have the time, you spend even if it's just a day or two here in the city, because the other thing that I haven't had time to show you today is the amazing food that they have in the area. So you must come and have some pinchos. Well, Cindy, I think it very much depends on the type of ticket that you take out, but consider that it's gonna be the best part of 20 euros. So it's not super expensive, but it's pricey. They have a fair few offers though, so if you make sure that you book in advance or something like that, it's much cheaper. But if you just turn up on the day, it can be pricey. So and that's because, well, at the end of the day, it's just world-class avant-garde, you know, art that they are developing here all the time. So they need to pay it at a dear price. And that's kind of all for today, guys. So thank you so much. To the beginning, this is gonna stay on YouTube. If you want to support the channel, you have pinned the message there with the links to our Buy Me a Coffee and our PayPal. You can find us on Travolution Buy Me a Coffee. And if you're around, I will see you on Tuesday for another lecture on the Golden Age of Spain. And that's all. Take care and see you later. Bye bye.